Christmas dinner, my daughter-in-law raised her glass and said, "We're ashamed of you." Then she laughed. Right there in my house, at my table, in front of her whole family. My son didn't say a word, so I stood up, folded my napkin nice and slow, looked her dead in the eye, and gave her one sentence. "By the end of January, you and Ryan are out of my house." That's when her smile finally vanished. The clink of porcelain snapped me out of my thoughts as my daughter-in-law packed my dishes into a box. "We need the room for my new dinnerware," Brooke said, not even bothering to look at me. Ryan stood there like a statue glued to his phone. 3 months earlier, they'd moved into the upstairs of my house. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet and saved some money. I'd said yes to help them out. What I hadn't signed up for was becoming a guest in my own home. I stared at the box, then at Brooke. She'd already rearranged the hallway furniture and dragged my plants out onto the back porch. "Those dishes stay," I said, calmly lifting the box off the table. "But they don't match my decor," she snapped. I carried it straight back to the kitchen. "This is my kitchen. Your decor stays upstairs." Ryan cleared his throat. "Mom, don't be so stubborn. Brooke just wants it to look nice." I didn't even turn around. I put every plate back in the cabinet, closed the door, and turned the key. Then I slipped that key right into my pocket. Brooke's mouth fell open a little. She wasn't used to hearing the word no. "If you two want your own stuff in the kitchen, you can use the shelf in the upstairs hallway," I said, while pouring myself a cup of coffee. No yelling, no fight, just facts. Brooke shot Ryan a furious look. He just shrugged helplessly. From that day on, the whole vibe in the house shifted. Brooke tried a different angle. She started leaving her dirty laundry in the downstairs bathroom, expecting me to wash it. The next morning, she found the basket sitting untouched right outside their bedroom door. I did my own chores, not hers. I knew she was testing me, seeing how much space she could take. But I wasn't the kind of woman who slowly got pushed out of her own life. I watched her next moves very carefully. Then a few days later, something showed up on my bank statement that called for a much clearer line in the sand. The bank letter was sitting on the kitchen table. Ryan and I had kept a joint emergency account for house stuff ever since his dad passed. It had seemed practical back then. Now I was seeing charges from fancy cosmetic stores and gourmet shops. Nothing huge, but it was the principle. Brooke had been using Ryan's card. I didn't call. I didn't yell through the house. I just put on my coat, grabbed my purse, and walked down to the branch on the corner. 10 minutes later, Ryan's card for that account was frozen. I moved the money to my personal account and closed the joint one. When I got home, they were both eating breakfast. "Mom, my card got declined at the bakery," Ryan said, staring at his phone. I poured myself a glass of water. "That account doesn't exist anymore. I closed it this morning." Brooke lowered her bagel. "Why? How are we supposed to pay for groceries now?" "You pay for your own groceries with your own money," I said, setting the glass down. That was an emergency house account, not for face creams and expensive wine. Ryan turned beet red. He knew exactly what I was talking about. Brooke folded her arms. "We live here, so we're part of the house. You're being really petty." "I'm being precise," I corrected her. "I'm not funding your lifestyle. From now on, your expenses are your problem." I left the kitchen and let them sit in the silence. After that, I only bought what I personally used. I even made my own shelf in the fridge. When Brooke noticed there was no milk for her coffee that weekend, she knocked on my door. I was on the couch, reading. "You didn't buy any milk," she said, accusingly. My milk will last me until Monday, I answered without looking up from my book. She slammed the door harder than necessary. That was just the start of her quiet little war. Not long after, I walked into my own living room and found something even bolder. I had to shut it down immediately and unmistakably. Friday night, I came home to loud voices. The living room was packed with people. Brooke had invited 4 of her friends over. Empty wine glasses covered my coffee table, chip bags were scattered everywhere, and someone had kicked off wet shoes on my rug. Brooke looked at me like I was crashing her party. "We're having a girls' night," she called over the music. "Can you close the door on your way to your room?" I didn't say a word. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a trash bag, and walked back in. Calmly, I started picking up the bottles and bags. The talking stopped. The music kept playing, but nobody was dancing anymore. "What are you doing?" Brooke asked, irritated. "I'm cleaning my living room," I said. I reached right past her friend and took the wine glass out of her hand. "Girls' night is over. This isn't a frat house basement." Brooke's face turned red. "You can't do that. We live here too. You live upstairs," I said, matter-of-factly. "The downstairs is my private space. I never agreed to host parties here." Her friends looked mortified. One by one, they grabbed their coats and left fast. Ryan came down the stairs just as the front door shut. He saw the mess and Brooke's angry face. "Did you have to do that, Mom?" "You embarrassed her in front of her friends." I set the trash bag down and looked my son straight in the eyes. "If you don't respect someone else's home, you embarrass yourself. Starting today, the living room door stays locked when I'm not here." I took the spare key out of the drawer and put it in my pocket. I didn't argue. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. The next day, the house was icy. Brooke wouldn't speak to me. She probably thought the silent treatment would make me cave. She didn't realize her silence was actually a gift. But then, the first of the month rolled around, and with it came a brand new, completely ridiculous demand about the utility bills. Something had to give, and soon. The envelope for the water and electric share was missing. Ryan and Brooke didn't pay rent, but they'd promised to cover a third of the utilities. On the 3rd, they were eating dinner when I brought it up. "Ryan, the envelope isn't here," I said, putting my fork down. He avoided my eyes. Brooke jumped in. "We're saving for a trip to Mexico. Since we're family, we figured you could cover the bills this month. You've got your pension." I looked at her for a second. She really thought she was smart. "My pension isn't your vacation fund," I said. "The utilities need to be paid by tomorrow." "But we already bought the plane tickets," Ryan whined. "Money's tight this month." "Then cancel the flights," I said, evenly. "Or take shorter showers." Brooke let out a short, harsh laugh. "You're not really going to make us pay for water while you sit alone in this huge house. That's ridiculous." I stood up, put my plate in the dishwasher, and dried my hands. I knew exactly where they kept the spare key to my SUV. Since Ryan had sold his car, they'd been using mine for big shopping trips. Without another word, I walked into the hall, took the car key off their hook, and added it to my own ring. A little later, Ryan stood in the hallway, looking confused. "Mom, where's the key for the Explorer?" "It's on my ring," I called from the living room. "The car stays parked. Gas and wear and tear cost money. Since you're short on cash, I don't want to tempt you." 10 minutes later, the exact envelope was on the kitchen table. Ryan stormed upstairs without a word. Brooke just glared at me from the stairs. The battle lines were crystal clear now. But December was coming fast, and Brooke obviously had her own big plans for Christmas, and my house plans that didn't include me and turned everything upside down. I was more than ready for that night. December brought snow and Brooke's need for control at full blast. Normally, I decorated, simply roasted a turkey and invited my sister over. This year, Brooke put up a giant, tacky plastic tree in the hallway. At breakfast, she announced her parents and brother were coming on Christmas Eve. "It's going to be modern this year," she said, smoothing a wrinkle in the tablecloth. "I'm cooking. Sushi, then a vegan course. We're moving with the times." I sipped my tea. She hadn't asked if her family could celebrate in my house, she'd just told me. "Fine," I said. Ryan looked surprised. He'd probably expected a fight. "You're okay with it, if Brooke wants to cook and host her family." "That's her business," I answered calmly. What I didn't say, I wasn't lifting a finger. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Brooke was in overdrive, cleaning, ordering expensive decorations, running around stores. Several times, she asked me to sign for packages or clean the downstairs windows. I politely but firmly said no every time. "This is your party, Brooke. Your responsibility," I told her. I spent my afternoons reading in my chair, bought myself some nice chocolates, and enjoyed the quiet. I let her keep the illusion of control. She wanted to play perfect hostess and act like the house was hers. Let her. On the afternoon of the 24th, the doorbell rang. Brooke's family stood there loaded with gifts. Her mom stepped inside and looked around admiringly. "Oh, Brooke, you have such a beautiful home. So spacious." Brooke smiled, flattered, and took their coats. She didn't correct her. She acted like she owned the place. I stayed in the background and watched the little performance. I knew this night wasn't going to end peacefully. The tension was thick, and I just waited patiently for the masks to drop. Dinner started out calm enough, but the wine flowed fast and loosened the mean tongues. That's when my pushy daughter-in-law's true colors came out loud and clear. The long table in my living room looked festive. Brooke's dad bragged nonstop about his job while her mom praised the new decor. "You've really done a nice job with the downstairs, Ryan," she said, sipping her wine. "Very tasteful. Not old-fashioned at all." Ryan mumbled something and stared at his plate. He didn't have the guts to tell her it was all my furniture, my house, my taste. I ate my sushi quietly and stayed out of the conversation. Brooke soaked up the compliments. She sat at the head of the table, the spot that had always been mine. The more wine she drank, the louder and bolder she got. She talked about her work projects, their vacation plans, and how exhausting it was to keep such a big house running. Every sentence had a little jab aimed my way. "It's such a burden," Brooke said dramatically, "especially when you have to do everything yourself and get zero real help." Her mom nodded sympathetically and glanced at me. "Some people just like to relax when they get older." I wiped my mouth with my napkin. I didn't feel anger, just cold, clear calm. They wanted me to explode so I'd look like the bitter old mother-in-law. I wasn't playing their game. I was waiting for the perfect moment. Because I knew Brooke couldn't resist going too far. After dessert, she stood up, tapped her glass with a fork. The clear ring silenced the table. Everyone looked at her. She smiled, but her eyes were ice cold. She took a deep breath for her big speech, the one that was supposed to change everything. I leaned back slowly in my chair, folded my hands, and looked straight at her. I knew exactly what was coming. It was inevitable. She needed the drama. Fine. I was ready for her worst. "I'd like to make a toast." Brooke began lifting her glass of red wine. To family, to success, and to finally finding our own place in life. Her parents smiled proudly. Ryan kept staring at the tablecloth. He could feel the tension but was too weak to step in. Brooke looked straight down at me. "We've accomplished so much this year. Ryan got promoted. We're planning our future. We're independent. She paused dramatically to make sure everyone was listening. It's just a shame not everyone in this room has the same drive. Some people just stand still and let themselves be taken care of. The table shifted uncomfortably. Brooke's dad cleared his throat. But she wasn't done. The wine had removed all her filters. She leaned forward. You sit here all day, criticize everything, and contribute nothing. Honestly. We're ashamed of you. She said it loud and clear. Then she laughed a short, bright, mocking laugh. Her mom joined in nervously, a weak little chuckle in the dead silence. Forks stopped moving. The crystal glasses sparkled in the warm light, but the room felt freezing. Brooke stood there with her glass raised and a triumphant smile on her face. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd broken me in front of her family and put me in my place. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I looked at Ryan. He gave the tiniest shake of his head, his face burning red with shame. But he stayed silent. He didn't defend me. That was all the confirmation I needed. I folded my cloth napkin neatly and placed it beside my plate. Then I stood up, slow, controlled no rush. I didn't lean on the table. I stood tall. Brooke's smile started to crack when she realized I wasn't looking down. I held her gaze. The silence in the room was heavy enough to touch. I took a breath for my own short, final response. This night wasn't ending the way she'd secretly hoped, not even close. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence carried every word to every corner of the room. You don't need to be ashamed of me, Brooke, I said, clearly and calmly. Because by the end of January, you and Ryan are moving out of my house. The smile disappeared from her face like I'd slapped it off. Her raised arm with the wine glass slowly dropped. Her hand shook. What she whispered. You can't just put us on the street. We're family. You just made it very clear how you feel about me, I replied, staying completely composed. You're both independent grown adults with jobs. There's no reason for you to live here for free anymore. Guest privileges are officially over. Brooke's mom opened her mouth, then closed it. She finally understood who actually ran this house. Ryan jumped up. Mom, please, she's had too much wine. She didn't mean it. She meant every word I said, looking at him. And you stayed quiet. I'm not kicking you out tonight. You have 5 weeks to find a place. That's generous. Brooke's face twisted. The wine, the humiliation in front of her parents, the total loss of control, it all hit her at once. She started crying. First quiet, then loud, ugly sobs. She collapsed into her chair and buried her face in her hands. Her tears were real, but they didn't move me. These were the tears of someone who'd finally realized actions have consequences. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't argued. I'd simply used the power I had as the owner of my own home. I turned away from the table. I hope you all still enjoy the rest of your Christmas Eve. Please clean up the kitchen before you go to bed. I walked toward the hallway. Brooke's sobbing followed me, but all I felt was deep, quiet peace. Tomorrow there would be a lot to sort out. It was over. The knot had finally snapped. Everything was clear, simple, and completely logical now for everyone in that room. No question about it. The house was silent the next morning. No music, no clattering dishes. Brooke's family had left in the middle of the night without a word. I made coffee and sat at the clean kitchen table. Ryan came down around 10. He looked exhausted. He sat across from me and rubbed his eyes. Mom, can we talk? Brooke's already packing boxes upstairs. She thinks you're really kicking us out. I'm not just thinking it. I'm doing it, I said, taking a sip. I let you stay to help you, not so I could be insulted and taken advantage of in my own home. She apologized, he tried weakly. She's been crying nonstop since last night. She knows she messed up. An apology doesn't change character, Ryan. She's crying because she lost control and her free ride, not because she's truly sorry. I looked at my son. I loved him, but I wasn't letting him drag me into his passive life. You need to start taking responsibility for yourself and your marriage. He swallowed hard. He knew I was right. There were no more big fights, no lawyers, no threats. I'd drawn my boundaries, and because I owned the house, controlled the finances, and managed the space, they had zero room to push back. The next few weeks, the house felt like a quiet transition camp. Brooke avoided eye contact, scurried through the halls, said only what she had to, and spent her time apartment hunting. I didn't help them pack. I didn't offer money for their new security deposit. They had that Mexico trip fund, they could use it now. The end of January came fast. With every box carried out the front door, I felt my home becoming mine again. The final day arrived on a cold, clear January morning, the day my two unwelcome housemates finally left. It was a genuinely good, freeing, peaceful day for me. I looked forward to taking the keys and locking the door behind them for good. The rental truck sat in the driveway. Ryan loaded the last boxes. Brooke was already in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. They'd found a small apartment on the edge of town, no backyard, no big hallway, no mother-in-law they could ignore. Ryan came back to the front door one last time and handed me the 2 keys. Here, Mom. That's all of them. I took the keys and slipped them into my cardigan. Thanks. Drive safe. The roads are slick. He nodded, turned, and got in the truck. No big dramatic goodbye. No fake reconciliation. They had to figure out their path, and I had mine back. As the truck turned the corner, I closed the door. The sound of that deadbolt sliding home was the sweetest noise I'd heard in months. I walked through the hallway into the living room. The ugly plastic tree was gone. The furniture was back exactly where I liked it. It wasn't too quiet, it was peaceful. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on for tea, and looked out at the winter garden. I wasn't lonely. I was free. I'd defended my boundaries without screaming, without complaining, and without waiting for anyone else to do it for me. I didn't need a lawyer to control my own life. I just needed clarity, determination, and the refusal to be pushed aside. Ryan called a week later, short and to the point. He sounded a little more grown up, maybe a bit tired now that he had to handle life on his own. We talked about the weather for 5 minutes. That was enough for now. I finished my tea, washed the cup, and put it away. It was my cupboard, my cup, my life. No one was ever going to make me feel like a guest in my own world again. The sun broke through the clouds just a little and warmed the old wood of my kitchen table where I sat completely alone, but deeply, quietly content. I smiled to myself. The future was mine, all mine. And that felt exactly right. Brooke thought humiliating me would make me smaller. It only reminded me who owned the room, the table, the keys, and the door. I didn't need revenge. I simply ended her free stay in the life she had mistaken for hers.